The call came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night that should have been like any other in Dubai's Al Nada district. A security guard's voice, steady but urgent, crackled through the emergency line. "We have a situation on Damascus Street. Third floor, corner unit. The door is open. Phone keeps ringing, and nobody's answering." What that guard discovered inside would expose a web of lies so devastating that it destroyed 3 lives in one night. But this isn't just another crime story from the glittering streets of Dubai. This is about the moment when a single text message became a death sentence. Have you ever sent a message you immediately regretted? Maybe it was to an ex, maybe it was something you typed in anger, or maybe it was a secret you thought would stay buried forever. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when you hit send and your stomach drops because you know there's no taking it back. But what if that message didn't just ruin your day? What if it ended someone's life? On that Tuesday night in Al Nada, the air was thick with more than just the usual sense of cardamom coffee and turmeric from neighboring kitchens. Fear had settled into the hallways like an unwelcome visitor. Inside apartment 3C, a young woman lay motionless on cool tiles, her dreams of hospitality management and a future in Dubai's booming tourism industry now nothing more than evidence in a homicide investigation. Her name was Zara. She was 20 years old. She had scratched her killer's face so hard that pieces of his skin were embedded under her fingernails. Do you know someone who's been betrayed by the person they trusted most? Someone who discovered that their partner was living a double life? That sickening moment when reality crashes down and you realize everything was a lie? 34-year-old Rami thought he was clever. A mid-level sales manager with a carefully constructed life. He believed he could have it all. A devoted wife at home and a passionate young mistress just blocks away. He told himself it was harmless. Just messages. Just meetings. Just sex. But lies have a way of multiplying, don't they? 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. And before you know it, you're trapped in a web so complex that the only way out seems to be violence. Here's what Rami didn't count on. Sexually transmitted infections don't respect secrets. When gonorrhea invaded his perfectly planned double life, it exposed everything. His wife, his mistress, the clinic visits he thought were private, the antibiotics he tried to hide. And when Zara sent him that final message, "You gave me something. If you don't fix this, I will tell your wife," she signed her own death warrant. This case has everything that makes crime in Dubai unique. A city where cameras watch every corner, where phone records are digital confessions, and where forensic science can pull DNA from the smallest fragment of evidence. It's a place where you can try to run, but the technology will always find you. But here's what haunts investigators to this day. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a moment of madness. This was a calculated decision made by a man who valued his reputation more than a human life. Are you someone who believes that actions should have consequences? That justice matters, especially for victims who can no longer speak for themselves? If you're someone who believes in justice for victims like Zara, hit that subscribe button, because walking away now means you're okay with letting her story go unheard. Zara deserves to have her story told, and frankly, if you can't even be bothered to tap subscribe after hearing what happened to her, then maybe you're exactly the kind of person who would walk past an open door and pretend you didn't see anything. Tonight, we're going inside the investigation that shocked Dubai's police force. We're examining the digital evidence that made escape impossible. And we're learning why sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one sharing your bed. This is the story of how one lie became 3 murders. The murder of a marriage, the murder of trust, and the murder of a 20-year-old girl whose only crime was believing a married man's promises. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, you need to meet the 3 people whose lives intersected in the most devastating way possible. Because here's the thing about crime, it doesn't happen to cartoon villains. It happens to real people with real dreams, real fears, and real reasons for making the choices they make. Meet Rami Al-Mansouri, 34 years old, originally from Lebanon, with the kind of polite mannerisms that made him popular with clients and colleagues. He wasn't the type of man who commanded attention when he walked into Dubai's gleaming office towers. Average height, carefully groomed beard, always wore a pressed shirt to work. He drove a modest sedan, paid his bills on time, and sent money back home to his parents every month. Rami worked as a sales manager for a mid-tier logistics company in Dera. Not glamorous, but stable. The kind of job that let him sponsor his wife's visa and rent a decent apartment. He was the guy who remembered birthdays, who offered to help colleagues move apartments, who never missed a deadline. His Arabic was fluent, his English was professional, and his smile was genuine enough to close deals. But beneath that carefully constructed exterior was a man who felt invisible. At 34, he looked around at Dubai's success stories. The Lamborghinis, the penthouse apartments, the Instagram posts from Burj Al Arab, and wondered when it would be his turn. He wasn't bitter exactly, but he was restless. Now meet his wife, Nadia, 31 years old, a mathematics teacher at a private school in Al Nada. Where Rami was outgoing, Nadia was thoughtful. Where he made quick decisions, she analyzed every angle. She was the kind of woman who packed emergency snacks for long car trips and kept detailed spreadsheets of their monthly expenses. Nadia loved her job. Really loved it. She lit up when talking about her students, especially the ones who struggled with fractions or algebra. She stayed late to help kids who needed extra support, and she spent her own money on classroom supplies. Her colleagues respected her, parents trusted her, and students remembered her years after graduation. She had moved to Dubai because she believed in their future together. Back home in Jordan, teaching salaries were modest, but here she could save money, travel during school holidays, and build something meaningful. She wanted children eventually, but first she wanted to establish herself, maybe get a master's degree, perhaps even become a department head. Nadia was organized to a fault. She meal prepped every Sunday, set reminders for bill payments, and kept a shared calendar with Rami color-coded by priority. She wasn't controlling. She was careful. She had watched too many expat couples crash and burn because they didn't plan properly. Finally, meet Zara Hassan, 20 years old, studying hospitality management at a private college while working evenings at a beauty salon in Karama. She was everything that Nadia wasn't: spontaneous, confident, comfortable with attention. She posted regularly on Instagram, nail art tutorials, coffee shop selfies, outfit of the day photos that showed off her style. Zara had big dreams. She wanted to work for one of Dubai's luxury hotels, maybe the Atlantis or the Burj Al Arab. She studied hard, worked long hours, and saved every dirham she could. Her parents back in Pakistan were proud but worried. Sending their daughter alone to Dubai was a leap of faith that kept them awake at night. She lived in a studio apartment that she'd decorated with fairy lights and plants from Dragon Mart. Small space, but it was hers. She cooked simple meals on a hot plate, video called her family every Friday, and dreamed of the day she could bring them to visit. Zara was social but not reckless. She went out with classmates, dated occasionally, but she was focused on her goals. She knew that her student visa was temporary, that she needed to prove herself worthy of a work visa, that one mistake could send her back to Karachi before her degree was finished. These three people, a restless husband, a dedicated wife, and an ambitious student, moved through Dubai's corridors completely unaware that their paths were about to cross. They shopped at the same Carrefour, probably passed each other in Dubai Mall, maybe even stood in the same elevator without making eye contact. Drop a comment and tell me, are you watching from Dubai? From somewhere else? Let me know if you're still with me at this point, because understanding who these people really were makes what happened next even more heartbreaking. None of them woke up that morning planning to destroy lives. But here's what I've learned covering true crime. The most devastating tragedies often begin with the most ordinary moments. It started with a haircut voucher. Nothing more romantic than that. A Groupon deal that Rami had saved on his phone for 3 months before finally booking an appointment at a salon in Karama. The kind of practical decision that married men make to stretch their budgets. The salon was small but busy, tucked between a Pakistani restaurant and a phone repair shop. The air smelled like hair products and strong coffee from the cafe next door. When Rami walked in that Thursday afternoon in March, he expected a quick trim and nothing more. Zara was finishing up with another client, carefully applying top coat to a set of burgundy nails. She looked up when he entered, smiled professionally, and told him to wait just 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes changed everything. She was different from the other stylists he'd encountered in Dubai, more talkative, more curious. As she washed his hair, she asked about his work, his favorite restaurants, whether he'd been to the new waterfront development in Blue Waters. Normal conversation, but something about her attention felt intoxicating. "You have really nice hair texture," she said, running her fingers through it. "Most of my clients have to use so much product, but yours is naturally thick." Such a simple compliment. But when was the last time Nadia had noticed anything about his appearance? When was the last time anyone had? Before he left, Zara handed him a card with the salon's contact information. "Next time you need a cut, ask for me specifically," she said. "I'll make sure you get the VIP treatment." The card sat in his wallet for 2 weeks. When Rami finally messaged the number, he told himself it was purely practical. The cut had been good, why change stylists? But when Zara responded with a smiley face emoji and "can't wait to see you again," something shifted in his chest. Their first real conversation happened via WhatsApp. She'd posted a story on Instagram showing her work, an elaborate set of gel extensions with tiny rhinestones, and he'd responded with a fire emoji. She messaged back, "Thanks. Do you always stay up this late scrolling through Instagram?" It was 11:30 p.m. Nadia was already asleep, her phone charging on the bedside table, her lesson plans for the next day neatly organized on the desk. "Just checking what's happening in the world," he typed back. "Want to know what's really happening in the world? Meet me for coffee tomorrow." He should have said no. Should have deleted her number. Should have gone home to his wife and forgotten about the young woman with the bright smile and curious questions. Instead, he said yes. Their first coffee meeting was at a generic chain in Karama, nothing special or romantic. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. They talked about work, about Dubai's rapid changes, about their families back home. Normal conversation between two people getting to know each other. But there was an undercurrent of something else. The way she leaned in when he spoke, how she laughed at his jokes just a little too enthusiastically, the moment when her hand brushed his across the table while reaching for the sugar. "I should probably go," he said after an hour, checking his watch. "My wife will be wondering where I am." "Oh." Zara's expression shifted slightly. "You didn't mention you were married. Does it matter?" She studied his face for a long moment. "I guess that depends on what this is." That question haunted him for days. What was this? He told himself it was friendship. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company. Nothing wrong with having friends, right? The second coffee became lunch. Lunch became dinner at a small Lebanese restaurant in Al Bersha where they were unlikely to run into anyone he knew. Dinner became long walks around Dubai Mall, conversations that stretched past midnight, WhatsApp threads filled with inside jokes and photos of their daily routines. "You're different when you're with me," Zara told him one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the Dubai fountain. "More relaxed. More like yourself." "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You seem lighter. Like you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." She was right. With Zara, he didn't have to think about mortgage payments or his performance review or whether they could afford to visit family this summer. He could just be Rami, not husband Rami or employee Rami or responsible Rami. When she first invited him back to her apartment, he hesitated for exactly 30 seconds. "I can't," he said. "This is getting complicated." "It's only complicated if you make it complicated," she replied, her hand finding his. "I'm not asking you to leave your wife. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just asking for tonight." He told himself it was just physical attraction. Just one night to get it out of his system. Just a temporary break from the routine of his perfectly planned life. But lies have momentum. One night became regular visits. Regular visits became a relationship neither of them wanted to define, but both of them needed to continue. 3 months into the affair, Rami woke up on a Saturday morning with a burning sensation that made him wince as he walked to the bathroom. At first, he blamed it on dehydration. Dubai's heat could play tricks on your body, and he'd been drinking more coffee than water lately. But by Monday, the pain was impossible to ignore. There was discharge, too, something he'd never experienced before. The kind of symptom that makes your blood run cold because deep down you know exactly what it means. He spent 2 days researching symptoms online, convincing himself it could be anything. A urinary tract infection, something he'd picked up from the gym. Anything except the truth that was staring him in the face. Wednesday night, while Nadia graded papers in the living room, Rami locked himself in the bathroom and Googled private clinics Dubai late hours. He found one in Dara that advertised confidential consultations and stayed open until 9 p.m. Dr. Khalil was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had clearly seen it all before. His clinic was small but professional, clean white walls, certificates in Arabic and English, the kind of place that catered to people who needed discretion. "How long have you been experiencing these symptoms?" Dr. Khalil asked, not looking up from his notes. 3, maybe 4 days. "Any new sexual partners recently?" Rami's throat tightened. "No. Just my wife." The lie came so easily it frightened him. Dr. Khalil nodded and explained the testing process. A urine sample, some swabs, results in 24 hours. We'll also test for other common infections. Better to be thorough. That night, Rami couldn't sleep. He lay next to Nadia, listening to her breathing, watching the way the streetlight filtered through their bedroom curtains. She was peaceful, trusting, completely unaware that her husband was potentially carrying a sexually transmitted infection. The call came during his lunch break the next day. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, your results are ready. Could you come in this evening to discuss them? Can't you tell me over the phone? I prefer to discuss these matters in person." But Rami already knew. The tone of the receptionist's voice, the formal request for an in-person visit. It all pointed to news he didn't want to hear. Neisseria gonorrhea. The words on the lab report looked foreign and clinical, but their meaning was crystal clear. Dr. Khalil explained the treatment. An antibiotic injection, a course of pills, abstinence from sexual activity for a week. "Your partner will need to be tested and treated as well," the doctor said gently. "This is very important to prevent reinfection." What if she hasn't been infected yet?" Dr. Khalil gave him a look that was both professional and slightly pitying. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, if you've been sexually active with your wife, she's been exposed. The responsible thing is to inform her immediately." Rami paid the bill in cash and drove home in silence. He had a story ready. He'd picked up an infection from a contaminated surface at the gym. It wasn't uncommon, right? These things happen to anyone. But telling Nadia would mean admitting he'd been to a doctor without her knowledge. It would mean explaining symptoms he'd hidden from her. It would mean questions he wasn't prepared to answer. So he decided to wait. Maybe she wouldn't get infected. Maybe he could treat himself quietly and this whole nightmare would disappear. For 2 weeks, he avoided intimacy with both women. He told Nadia he was stressed about a big presentation at work. He told Zara he was traveling for business. The lies multiplied like bacteria, spreading through every aspect of his life. But gonorrhea doesn't respect wishful thinking. Nadia first noticed the symptoms on a Wednesday morning as she prepared for school. Pelvic pain, unusual discharge, a fever that made her cancel her afternoon classes. She was methodical about her health the same way she was methodical about everything else. She booked an appointment through the DHA app and went to see her gynecologist that same day. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been Nadia's doctor since they moved to Dubai. She was British, straightforward, and had a reputation for being thorough. When the test results came back positive for gonorrhea, she delivered the news with clinical precision. "This is a sexually transmitted infection, Nadia. Both you and your partner will need treatment." The words hit Nadia like physical blows. "That's impossible. My husband and I, he wouldn't." "I understand this is shocking news, but the test is definitive. You've been exposed to gonorrhea, which means your sexual partner has it as well." That evening, Nadia sat at their small dining table with the lab results in front of her, waiting for Rami to come home. She had spent the afternoon crying, then analyzing, then crying again. She thought about their recent intimacy, his strange behavior over the past few weeks, the way he'd been avoiding her physically. When Rami walked through the door at 7:30, He found his wife holding a piece of paper that would destroy everything he'd worked to protect. "We need to talk," Nadia said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He saw the letterhead from the clinic and his knees nearly buckled. If you're invested in seeing how justice works in cases like this, subscribe now, because people who don't subscribe are essentially saying they don't care about holding people accountable for their actions. What happened next would test every lie Rami had told himself about being a good husband. 3 months into the affair, Rami woke up on a Saturday morning with a burning sensation that made him wince as he walked to the bathroom. At first, he blamed it on dehydration. Dubai's heat could play tricks on your body, and he'd been drinking more coffee than water lately. But by Monday, the pain was impossible to ignore. There was discharge, too, something he'd never experienced before. The kind of symptom that makes your blood run cold because deep down you know exactly what it means. He spent 2 days researching symptoms online, convincing himself it could be anything. A urinary tract infection, something he'd picked up from the gym. Anything except the truth that was staring him in the face. Wednesday night, while Nadia graded papers in the living room, Rami locked himself in the bathroom and Googled private clinics Dubai late hours. He found one in Dara that advertised confidential consultations and stayed open until 9 p.m. Dr. Khalil was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had clearly seen it all before. His clinic was small but professional, clean white walls, certificates in Arabic and English, the kind of place that catered to people who needed discretion. "How long have you been experiencing these symptoms?" Dr. Khalil asked, not looking up from his notes. 3, maybe 4 days. "Any new sexual partners recently?" Rami's throat tightened. "No, just my wife." The lie came so easily it frightened him. Dr. Khalil nodded and explained the testing process. A urine sample, some swabs, results in 24 hours. We'll also test for other common infections. Better to be thorough. That night, Rami couldn't sleep. He lay next to Nadia, listening to her breathing, watching the way the streetlight filtered through their bedroom curtains. She was peaceful, trusting, completely unaware that her husband was potentially carrying a sexually transmitted infection. The call came during his lunch break the next day. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, your results are ready. Could you come in this evening to discuss them? Can't you tell me over the phone? I prefer to discuss these matters in person." But Rami already knew. The tone of the receptionist's voice, the formal request for an in-person visit. It all pointed to news he didn't want to hear. Neisseria gonorrhea. The words on the lab report looked foreign and clinical, but their meaning was crystal clear. Dr. Khalil explained the treatment. An antibiotic injection, a course of pills, abstinence from sexual activity for a week. Your partner will need to be tested and treated as well, the doctor said gently. This is very important to prevent reinfection. What if she hasn't been infected yet? Dr. Khalil gave him a look that was both professional and slightly pitying. Mr. Al-Mansouri, if you've been sexually active with your wife, she's been exposed. The responsible thing is to inform her immediately. Rami paid the bill in cash and drove home in silence. He had a story ready. He'd picked up an infection from a contaminated surface at the gym. It wasn't uncommon, right? These things happen to anyone. But telling Nadia would mean admitting he'd been to a doctor without her knowledge. It would mean explaining symptoms he'd hidden from her. It would mean questions he wasn't prepared to answer. So he decided to wait. Maybe she wouldn't get infected. Maybe he could treat himself quietly and this whole nightmare would disappear. For 2 weeks, he avoided intimacy with both women. He told Nadia he was stressed about a big presentation at work. He told Zara he was traveling for business. The lies multiplied like bacteria, spreading through every aspect of his life. But gonorrhea doesn't respect wishful thinking. Nadia first noticed the symptoms on a Wednesday morning as she prepared for school. Pelvic pain, unusual discharge, a fever that made her cancel her afternoon classes. She was methodical about her health the same way she was methodical about everything else. She booked an appointment through the DHA app and went to see her gynecologist that same day. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been Nadia's doctor since they moved to Dubai. She was British, straightforward, and had a reputation for being thorough. When the test results came back positive for gonorrhea, She delivered the news with clinical precision. This is a sexually transmitted infection, Nadia. Both you and your partner will need treatment. The words hit Nadia like physical blows. That's impossible. My husband and I, we don't. He wouldn't. I understand this is shocking news, but the test is definitive. You've been exposed to gonorrhea, which means your sexual partner has it as well. That evening, Nadia sat at their small dining table with the lab results in front of her, waiting for Rami to come home. She had spent the afternoon crying, then analyzing, then crying again. She thought about their recent intimacy, his strange behavior over the past few weeks, the way he'd been avoiding her physically. When Rami walked through the door at 7:30, he found his wife holding a piece of paper that would destroy everything he'd worked to protect. "We need to talk," Nadia said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He saw the letterhead from the clinic and his knees nearly buckled. If you're invested in seeing how justice works in cases like this, subscribe now, because people who don't subscribe are essentially saying they don't care about holding people accountable for their actions. What happened next would test every lie Rami had told himself about being a good husband. The confrontation lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of accusations, denials, tears, and the slow, methodical destruction of a 7-year marriage. Nadia placed the lab results on the table between them like evidence in a trial. "Explain this to me, Rami. Explain how I have gonorrhea when you're supposedly the only man I've been with in years." His first instinct was to attack. "How do I know you didn't get it somewhere else? How do I know you haven't been lying to me?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. Nadia stared at him with an expression he'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but complete bewilderment at the stranger sitting across from her. "You think I'm having an affair?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I work, I come home, I grade papers, I go to bed. When exactly am I supposed to be meeting these mysterious men?" Rami's second line of defense crumbled as quickly as the first. He tried to suggest contaminated surfaces, shared towels at the gym, rare cases of non-sexual transmission he'd read about online. Each excuse sounded more desperate than the last. Finally, at 11 p.m., with Nadia's tears dried and her voice hoarse from shouting, he broke. "There was someone else," he whispered. "It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. Someone else." Nadia repeated the words like she was learning a foreign language. "How many times?" "It doesn't matter." "How many times, Rami?" "A few months. But I ended it. It's over." The slap came so fast he didn't see it coming. His cheek burned, but not as much as the shame that followed. What Rami didn't tell Nadia was that he hadn't ended anything. While they were fighting, his phone was buzzing with messages from Zara. Messages that would soon turn his world upside down. 2 days after his confrontation with Nadia, Rami received a call that made his hands shake. "I need to see you." Zara's voice was tight with anger. "Tonight. I can't. My wife knows about us. Everything is. Your wife isn't my problem right now. My problem is that I just left a clinic in Karama with a diagnosis that has your name all over it." The line went quiet except for the sound of Rami's heart pounding in his ears. "You gave me gonorrhea," Zara continued. "Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what this could do to my reputation, my family, my future in this country?" "Zara, I'm sorry. I had no idea." "You had no idea? Or you knew and didn't bother to tell me?" He couldn't answer because they both knew the truth. That evening, they met at a coffee shop in Alberta. Zara looked different, older, harder, like someone who had just learned an expensive lesson about trust. She ordered nothing, just sat across from him with her arms crossed. "I trusted you," she said. "When you told me you were separated from your wife, I believed you. When you said you were clean, I believed that too. I never said I was separated. Don't." Her voice cut through his protest. "Don't make this worse by lying to my face again." She pulled out her phone and showed him screenshots. Their conversations, photos he'd sent, timestamps that proved the overlap with his marriage. "I've been thinking about what to do with all this," she said, scrolling through the evidence. Part of me wants to send these directly to your wife. Let her see exactly who she's married to. Rami's mouth went dry. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? You destroyed my health, my trust, and potentially my future in Dubai. Why shouldn't I return the favor? Here's what Rami understood about Dubai that Zara perhaps didn't fully grasp. In a city built on reputation and connections, scandals could end careers overnight. His company had strict morality clauses in their contracts. His visa was sponsored through his job. If this became public, if it reached his employer or their social circle, he wouldn't just lose his marriage, he could lose everything. What do you want? He asked. I want you to pay for my medical treatment. I want you to compensate me for the time I've missed from work. And I want you to tell your wife the truth about what kind of man she's married to. I can pay for the treatment, but telling Nadia more details won't help anyone. Zara leaned forward, her eyes cold. That's not your choice to make. You had your chance to be honest. Now I'm taking that choice away from you. She stood to leave, then turned back with words that would haunt him for the rest of his short, miserable life. You have 48 hours to tell her everything. If you don't, I will. And trust me, my version of the story will be much more detailed than yours. But what Rami didn't know was that Dubai's eyes never blink. Every camera, every phone tower, every digital footprint was about to become evidence in a case that would shock even experienced homicide detectives. 48 hours. That's all the time Rami had to confess everything to Nadia or watch Zara destroy his life with screenshots and details that would make his betrayal even more humiliating. He spent those 2 days in agony. At work, he stared at spreadsheets without seeing numbers. At home, he watched Nadia move through their apartment like a ghost, making dinner, grading papers, speaking to him only when absolutely necessary. The silence between them was suffocating. On Thursday evening, his phone buzzed with a message that made his blood turn to ice. Time's up. We need to talk. Tonight, 8 p.m. My place. Rami stared at the message for 10 minutes, his hands trembling. He could ignore it. He could block her number. He could pack a bag and disappear into the night. But running wasn't an option. Dubai wasn't the kind of place where you could vanish. Every visa, every bank account, every movement was tracked. Besides, where would he go? Back to Lebanon with nothing? To another Gulf country where his reputation would follow him? At 7:30 p.m., he told Nadia he was visiting a client in Al-Qasais. She didn't look up from her lesson plans. Will you be late? She asked, her voice flat. Maybe. Don't wait up. Those would be the last words he ever spoke to his wife as a free man. The drive to Damascus Street felt like traveling to his own execution. Dubai's evening traffic moved in its usual organized chaos, luxury cars and delivery bikes, construction trucks and taxis, all flowing through arteries of a city that never truly slept. Rami parked outside Zara's building at 7:46 p.m. The security camera in the parking area recorded his license plate, the timestamp burned into the digital file that would later become Exhibit A in a murder trial. He sat in his car for 3 minutes, rehearsing what he would say. Maybe he could reason with her. Maybe he could offer her more money. Maybe he could convince her that destroying his life wouldn't improve hers. The building lobby was typical for Al Nada: clean tiles, artificial plants, a security desk where a bored guard scrolled through his phone. Rami nodded politely as he passed, his baseball cap pulled low. The elevator carried him to the 3rd floor with mechanical indifference. Apartment 3C was at the end of the corridor. Rami could hear a television through thin walls, someone cooking dinner, a baby crying in a neighboring unit. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives. He knocked twice. Zara opened the door wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked younger without makeup, more vulnerable. And for a moment he remembered why he'd been attracted to her in the first place. You're late, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The studio apartment was exactly as he remembered, fairy lights strung along one wall, plants on the windowsill, textbooks stacked on a small desk. But now everything felt different, charged with tension and the weight of consequences. So, Zara said, crossing her arms, did you tell her? It's complicated. No, Rami. It's actually very simple. Either you told your wife the truth or you didn't. Which is it? He couldn't meet her eyes. I tried. But she's been so upset already, and you didn't tell her. I need more time. Zara laughed, but there was no humor in it. More time? I gave you 48 hours to do the right thing. That's 48 hours more than you gave me when you decided to lie about being married. She walked to her small kitchen counter and picked up her phone. Fine. I'll call her myself. Wait. Rami stepped forward, his heart racing. You can't just. Can't what? Tell her the truth? Show her the photos you sent me? Let her read the messages where you called her boring and said you wished you'd never gotten married. He had never said those exact words, but close enough. Close enough to destroy what little remained of his relationship with Nadia. Please, he said. There has to be another way. There was another way. It was called honesty. You chose lies instead. She started dialing. Rami lunged forward and grabbed for the phone. Let go. Zara pulled back, but his grip was stronger. You're going to ruin everything. Everything was already ruined. The phone flew from her hands and hit the floor, the screen cracking against the tile. They both stared at it for a moment, then at each other. Look what you did, Zara said, her voice rising. You broke my phone. I'll buy you a new one. With what money? The same money you were going to use to pay for my medical bills that you never actually paid for. She was right. In all his panic and self-pity, he hadn't even followed through on his promise to cover her treatment costs. Get out, Zara said, kneeling down to examine her broken phone. Get out of my apartment right now. We need to figure this out. No, we don't. There's nothing to figure out. I'm done with your lies, your excuses, your promises you never keep. She stood up, fragments of glass falling from her hands. I'm calling your wife tomorrow morning. I'm telling her everything. And then I'm calling your office. My office. You think this only affects your marriage? I looked up your company, Rami. They have social media policies, morality clauses. How do you think they'll feel about an employee who lies, cheats, and spreads diseases? The room felt like it was closing in on him. His job, his marriage, his visa, his entire life in Dubai. All of it balanced on the silence of a 20-year-old girl who had every reason to hate him. I can't let you do that, he said quietly. You can't stop me. In the comments, tell me what you think went through Rami's mind in those final moments. And if you're still watching, type justice, so I know you're following this story to the end. What happened inside apartment 3C took less than 4 minutes. The strangulation, the panicked cleanup attempts, Rami's desperate flight from the scene. All of it captured not by human witnesses, but by the unblinking digital eyes that monitor every corner of modern Dubai. The first mistake Rami made was believing he could outsmart a city built on surveillance. When the security guard called 999 at 9:47 p.m., he triggered a response system that had been refined through years of handling everything from petty theft to international crimes. Dubai Police's Al Qusai station dispatched a patrol unit within 6 minutes. By 10:15 p.m., detectives from the Criminal Investigation Department had arrived, followed by specialists from the General Department of Forensic Science and Criminology. The crime scene told a story that contradicted any hope Rami might have had about calling this an accident. Detective Inspector Hassan Al-Zabi had worked homicides in Dubai for 12 years. He'd seen domestic violence, business disputes gone wrong, and crimes of passion that destroyed families across every nationality. But this scene was different. It spoke of rage, panic, and amateur attempts to cover up evidence. Look at this, he told his partner, pointing to water droplets around the kitchen sink. Someone washed something here recently. The coffee mug on the counter bore traces of lipstick, but it had been rinsed and placed back. Not cleaned properly, just quickly splashed with water by someone who had watched too many crime shows and thought that was enough. The victim's phone lay cracked on the floor, but forensic technician Amira Khalil noted something crucial. The screen is damaged, but the data is recoverable. And see this? The call log shows the last outgoing attempt was at 8:23 p.m. Who was she trying to call? Khalil scrolled through the retrieved data. A contact saved as our work, with a UAE mobile number. Within 2 hours, that number was traced to a Zain mobile account registered under Rami al-Mansouri, complete with Emirates ID verification and address in Al Nada. But the real breakthrough came from the building security system. Dubai's building codes require CCTV coverage in all common areas, and this complex exceeded those requirements. 6 cameras covered the lobby, parking area, and elevator access. The footage revealed a timeline that would become the backbone of the prosecution's case. 7:46 p.m. A sedan parks in Visitor Space 12. License plate clearly visible. 7:49 p.m. A man in a baseball cap enters the lobby, nods to security, proceeds to elevator. 8:52 p.m. The same man exits the elevator, cap still low but visible scratches on his face and neck. 8:54 p.m. The man leaves the building, walking quickly toward the parking area. The license plate belonged to a 2019 Toyota Camry registered to Rami al-Mansouri. Detective Al-Zabi made a call to Dubai's traffic department. I need ALPR hits on this plate number for the past 48 hours. Automatic license plate recognition cameras throughout Dubai had captured Rami's movements like digital breadcrumbs. His car had been photographed entering Al Nada at 7:41 p.m. and leaving at 8:58 p.m. More importantly, cell tower data showed his phone had been in the area during the same time window before going dark from 7:40 to 8:56 p.m. He turned off his phone, Detective Al-Zabi noted. Conscious effort to avoid tracking. This wasn't spontaneous. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Under Zara's fingernails, technicians found skin cells that would later match Rami's DNA profile. The scratches on his face in the CCTV footage told the story of a victim who had fought back. Dr. Fatima al-Rashid, the forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy, documented bruising patterns consistent with manual strangulation. The victim fought. There are defensive wounds on her hands, and the fingernail evidence suggests she managed to scratch her attacker's face and neck. The phone records painted a detailed picture of the relationship. Months of messages between Rami and Zara, photos exchanged, location data showing their meetings at various Dubai locations. But the most damning evidence was Zara's final message, sent just hours before her death. Time's up. We need to talk. Tonight, 8 p.m. My place. By 6 a.m. the following morning, Dubai police had assembled enough evidence to make an arrest. They found Rami at his apartment, where he was sitting fully dressed on his couch, staring at nothing. His wife had already left for work. Rami al-Mansouri? Detective Al-Zabi showed his badge. We need you to come with us for questioning in connection with the death of Zara Hassan. The scratches on his face were fresh and deep. His hands shook as he reached for his jacket. I want to call a lawyer, he said. That's your right. But first, we need a DNA sample. The buccal swab took 30 seconds to collect. The lab comparison would take 6 hours to confirm what everyone in that room already knew. Dubai's forensic capabilities had turned what Rami thought was a private crime into a public humiliation. Every lie, every attempt to cover his tracks, every moment of the evening had been recorded, analyzed, and documented with scientific precision. There was no escape from the truth when the truth was written in DNA, time-stamped in CCTV footage, and logged in cell tower records. The DNA results came back with a statistical probability that made denial impossible. 1 in 2.7 billion. The skin cells under Zara's fingernails belonged to Rami al-Mansouri. When confronted with this evidence in the interrogation room at Dubai Police Headquarters, Rami's carefully constructed denials crumbled like sand. For 6 hours, he maintained his innocence. He claimed he'd left Zara alive. He suggested she must have been killed by someone else after he departed. But the timeline destroyed every lie he attempted to tell. Detective Al-Zabi laid out the evidence methodically. CCTV footage showing Rami's arrival and departure, cell tower data placing his phone in the area, the victim's final message arranging their meeting, and the forensic proof that she had clawed his face during the struggle. The medical examiner estimates time of death between 8:10 and 8:50 p.m., the detective said calmly. Your car left the parking area at 8:54 p.m. There was no one else in that apartment. At 2:17 a.m., after consulting with a lawyer who had arrived from a top Dubai firm, Rami broke. "It was an accident," he whispered. "I never meant for her to die." The confession was recorded, witnessed, and would later become central to the prosecution's case. But in Dubai's legal system, intent matters as much as action. The trial began 4 months later in Dubai's criminal court. The courtroom was sterile and efficient, with Arabic and English interpretation available for all participants. Rami sat between two defense attorneys, wearing a pressed shirt and looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 months. Nadia attended every day of the proceedings. She sat in the back row, her hair pulled into a severe bun, her face a mask of controlled devastation. She had not spoken to her husband since his arrest. She had filed for divorce the week after his confession made headlines across Dubai's Arabic and English media. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. Dr. Al-Rashid testified about the cause of death. Manual strangulation requires sustained pressure for several minutes. This was not a momentary loss of control. The forensic expert explained the DNA evidence. The telecommunications engineer traced the phone records. The CCTV analyst walked the court through footage that showed Rami's movements minute by minute. Defense attorneys argued that this was manslaughter, not murder. They painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by circumstances, facing blackmail, reacting in panic rather than with premeditation. "My client made a terrible mistake," the lead defense counsel told the 3-judge panel. But this was not a calculated killing. This was a moment of desperation that got out of control. The prosecution disagreed. The defendant turned off his phone to avoid tracking. He wore a cap to obscure his identity on camera. He attempted to clean the scene. These are not the actions of someone acting in the heat of passion. The judges deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of murder. Under UAE law, murder convictions can result in execution or life imprisonment, depending on circumstances and judicial discretion. The court sentenced Rami to life imprisonment, 25 years under UAE practice, followed by deportation and payment of blood money to Zara's family. His appeal was rejected 8 months later. The headlines wrote themselves: "Dubai affair ends in murder. Gonorrhea leads to homicide. Married man gets life for killing mistress." Social media exploded with commentary about moral decay, the dangers of extramarital relationships, and the swift justice of Dubai's courts. But beyond the sensational details, 3 families were destroyed forever. Zara's parents in Pakistan buried their daughter without ever seeing her body, her dreams of a hospitality career reduced to evidence in a murder trial. Rami's family in Lebanon disowned him publicly, refusing to visit him in prison or acknowledge his existence. And Nadia moved through the wreckage of her life with quiet determination, selling their furniture, canceling their lease, and eventually accepting a teaching position in Canada where no one knew her story. If this case taught you something about consequences, prove it by subscribing. Because viewers who don't subscribe are basically saying they learned nothing from Zara's tragic death. There's a detail from the forensic report that stays with you long after the courtroom doors close and the headlines fade. Under Zara's right thumb, beneath a crescent of broken nail, was a microscopic fleck of skin that matched Rami's DNA profile. Such a tiny thing, smaller than a grain of rice, invisible to the naked eye. But it spoke louder than any confession, any witness testimony, any security camera footage. It was Zara's final act of defiance, her last attempt to identify the man who was stealing her future. That fragment of evidence represents something profound about justice in the modern world. Bodies remember what people try to forget. Technology preserves what criminals try to erase. Truth has a way of surviving even when everything else is destroyed. This case teaches us that lies don't just hurt, they multiply. Rami's first lie was telling Zara he was separated from his wife. His second was hiding his infection. His third was promising to pay for her medical treatment. Each lie required bigger lies to sustain it, until the only way out seemed to be violence. But here's what haunts investigators who worked this case. None of it was inevitable. At any point, Rami could have chosen honesty. He could have told Nadia about the affair before she got infected. He could have ended the relationship when Zara started making demands. He could have walked away from that apartment on Damascus Street and faced the consequences of his choices like an adult. Instead, he chose murder. Dubai is a city built on ambition and reinvention, where people come to escape their past and build new futures. The streets hum with the energy of millions of people working toward their dreams. In that context, this crime feels particularly tragic. A young woman's dreams cut short by a man who valued his comfort more than her life. Today, if you walk past that building in El Nada, you'll see the same glass doors, the same security desk, the same cameras recording everything. Life has moved on because life always does. New tenants occupy the apartments. New security guards check their phones in the lobby. New stories of love and betrayal and consequence play out behind closed doors. But apartment 3C remains empty. The property management company hasn't been able to find tenants willing to live where Zara died. It sits vacant, a reminder that some moments change everything, that some choices can't be undone, and that sometimes the price of lies is measured in lives. Thank you for watching this investigation with me. If you believe justice matters, hit that like button, subscribe to Sinister Thoughts for more true crime stories, and ring the notification bell so you never miss when we expose the truth behind the headlines. Remember, in a world full of cameras and DNA evidence, the truth always finds a way to surface.